At this point, we have our stage set up. We have our snippets added over here on the side under our quick references. And we have all of our tools and all the other items set up. Let's start off by now going and adding something to the stage. And there's a couple ways you can add things to a stage. You can import an image, you can draw it yourself, and you can actually use one of the shapes. So I'm going to start off by using one of the shapes to begin with. So I'm going to click on, at this point, a rectangle. And I got two actual rectangle choices. I got a rectangle tool and a rectangle primitive tool. The rectangle tool will just draw a rectangle. So if I take this and I draw out a shape here, okay, and I'm going to make the this just a little bit different. So that's the one that is just a regular rectangle. Now I'm going to choose the rectangle that is made with a primitive tool. So I take this, draw it, it looks exactly the same. Both have blue centers and they both have a little green strokes on them. So that's the stroke on it. And if I go up, and I'm going to be using a lot of times in this course, the black arrow at the very top of your toolbar, that's a select arrow. That allows you to select items, allows you to manipulate them, change them, things like that. But really, that's what you're going to be using to literally click on things and move things around and to select items. So I'm going to click on the select tool. And if I click on the one on the left, pull it away, I can separate out the, and I'm going to change this to a different color so you can see it. You can separate out the fill from the stroke. So the fill is the blue part, the stroke is the red part. Okay, so I can separate those two. If I do it with the primitive tool, I click on this, you'll notice I get the dots around it, but if I drag it, I can't eliminate, I can't move the fill outside the stroke. So as you're building things, you may find there's times when you just want to have it that the shape does not have the ability to pull about the fill and the stroke. In that case, you would use the primitive tools. And there's primitive for both the rectangle as well as the circle tools. I prefer to use actually the regular rectangle, not the primitive tool, because it does give me the greatest degree of flexibility. So I'm going to actually go and I'm going to take these off, and I'm going to now use the regular rectangle shape, and I'm going to put this on the screen. And so, as I was just mentioning, I mentioned two terms that you may not have heard before. The first one is fill, and that's the interior of whatever shape you draw. In this case, when I click on it, it becomes all gritty, like little white areas inside of it. And then I have something on the outside, which is called a stroke. And the stroke is the items that go around the outside of a fill. Okay, they each can be manipulated separately. So if I have a rectangle, I can actually take and modify that, and I can do it by clicking on a corner, or I can click on the center of something. Okay, so if I select my selection tool, roll my cursor up to the edge of something, actually I have to deselect it. If I roll up my cursor up to the edge, you'll notice that it gets a little curve behind it. If I do that, I can actually push or pull that line, and it will basically adjust that line and the fill and the stroke. If I am going from a corner while I'm in the select, I can actually move that corner around. Actually, other powers too. So if I'm drawing this and I want to eliminate points, so say that I want to make it so that I have a shape that just has got three sides and makes a triangle. If I go over to my pen tool, click on my pen tool, I've got other options on this. I'm clicking and holding down on the pen tool. And I see one that says delete anchor points. Well, remember that all those corners are actually anchor points. So if I go over here to this, click on it, it actually deletes that anchor point and makes that straight line. So if you run across a situation where you want to take and eliminate one of the anchor points so you get your shape a certain way, you can actually use the minus on it, which is a delete anchor point, to remove the anchor points. You can also add anchor points but I'm not going to go into that today. Really, the focus that I wanted to let you know about is the ability to draw with a pen tool and also delete points with a pen tool. So in our case now, I'm going to go back to my main select, and I'm going to take and modify this. So right now, and I'm clicking and holding and dragging over this. If I click and hold and drag over this, I now have selected both the fill color and the stroke color. And say that I want to do something with it, like rotate it or make it bigger or smaller. Well, the tool that I would use for that is over here. It's the third item down on your toolbar. It's called Free Transform. So I'm going to click on Free Transform. It takes whatever shape you have and it puts a box around it. And then with that box, I got a number of different things. If I go to the corner, I can actually turn it and rotate that. If I go to the bottom and pull, I can actually make it longer. If I move it to the right, I could change the angle of it. So Free Transform is going to be your best friend for many things you do. Okay, when you're done transforming it, or if I'm done curving it, select your selection tool, and now it's set. Okay, so at this point, we've just manipulated a shape, and this shape is basically, we can add a number of different shapes together. Now, these shapes that I'm adding are all appearing on the timeline. Okay, and since I only have one layer on the timeline, they're all appearing on frame 1 of that timeline. Okay, so if I draw another shape, if I draw a rectangle, that is also appearing on the timeline, but they're all occurring here in frame 1 of layer 1. So with these two things, I can draw a number of different shapes on here, but if I'm going to take and make changes to any of the shapes to manipulate them, so if I want to make it so there's a motion with it, or I want to be able to edit things separately, then I need to put things on different layers. So right now, I've actually drawn 2 shapes on there, something that looks kind of like a house. So I'm going to take and I'll finish this up. I'm going to select it, and you can select by either dragging over it or double clicking. Double clicking selects the fill and the stroke, and I'm going to transform the shape a little bit more. Go up to my curve, square it up. That looks pretty square. And I'm going to move this down for the roof of the house. Okay. So right now, I've got 2 independent shapes, and I can do things with those shapes. I can move them around on the screen. I can take and can edit them, but they're just shapes at this point. I'm just drawing with them. Okay, and those 2 shapes are actually on layer 1, and I'm going to treat layer 1 as if it's the background. It's really critical to make sure you label your layers, because label 1, label 2, label 3 mean absolutely nothing to you. So if you just double click on the layer down here in the lower left hand corner, I'm going to put in there BKG for background. It's just a shorthand. I could have typed in the whole word. However, it's just too long to type in there. But if I put BKG, I know that that represents background. And if it's something that I want over top of the background, then I'll create a new layer and I'll put it basically on that. So if I create down here in the lower left-hand corner, if I click this little thing, it looks like a bend over piece of paper. And when you roll your cursor over it, it says new layer. If you click on that, it adds a new layer up above it. And so at this point, I'm going to use this layer as the layer that I'm going to take and make something move. Okay, I'm going to make a ball travel across the screen, and I'll just make the sun rising. Okay, so I'm going to just take and type on this, and I'm going to type in their sun. Okay, so the sun is basically one of my layers, and I'm going to take and add a shape to that sun layer. So since I'm going to treat the sun as an oval, I'm going to click on the oval tool, and when I do that, I have 2 options right away. I can change the color, and I could have done that with the house as well, but I'm going to change the color. So this is the sun. I'm going to make it so that it's got a line around the outside that's bright orange, and I'm going to increase the stroke size. So right now it's just 1, I'm going to increase it to 3. And you can type it in here too. So I'm going to type it in or use a slider. So it's a 3 pixel wide stroke. I'm going to make the fill also yellow to fit. And now I'm going to draw my shape. And I'm going to make sure that I'm on the sun layer. That's what's highlighted. So I'm going to drag and draw my shape. Okay. And so now I have this circle basically on my screen. Okay. And that circle by itself, it's just a circle. Okay. What I want to do is I want to make it so that it moves across my screen and up on top of the house. Okay. Well, in order to do that, I need to animate it. And I can take any shape and actually animate it as long as it's on its own layer. So to start the animation, I'm going to go down to my timeline and I'm going to think about how long do I want this animation to occur. So do I want it to occur in 1 second, which would be 15 frames, or do I want it to occur over 2 seconds? So I'm going to have it occur over 2 seconds. I'm going to click on 30, and that's 30 frames. So it's 2 seconds. Each frame is 15 frames per second. And now I'm going to take and add in there a keyframe. So I was just reading about something that is new in Animate. So in class, I was talking about using keyframes whenever you needed to make an animation. Well, in Animate, there's actually a new option. You can use your keyframes as points of change to start something new, but you can actually create an animation without having to use a keyframe. So that is very different than Flash. So right now, I'm going to show you what I mean. In my, I want to make it so my sun moves. And before we would go to, and I want to be on over 30 frames. So I'm going to click my cursor on frame 30. And on frame 30, I am going to take, and instead of inserting a keyframe this time, I'm just going to insert a frame. Now you'll notice it just looks like a frame that starts from beginning to end. But one of the things I could do now, if I click on frame 1, and I'm a big right clicker, so I use Control. If I was on a Mac, I do Control, hold down the Control button, and click, and get all of the options. If I'm on a PC, I just right click. So I'm going to go up to Create MotionTween. It's going to tell me right away at that point saying, I can't do a MotionTween because this is not a symbol. Would you like to do it for me? And then I say, okay. So now it's converted into a symbol. I know it's converted to a symbol is because it's got a blue line around the outside. That means that it's a symbol. And so you'll look at your timeline. You'll also know that it's blue. So the timeline, once it turns blue, means that you have a MotionTween. So what I'm going to do is just like we did in class, but without the keyframe. I'm going to click on frame 30. And I'm going to now move my shape to where I want it to be. So I'm going to put up here. I think it's above the house. And you'll notice it gets the little dots after it. That's what we want. We want to make sure we see those little dots. Each dot represents a frame in your steps. So there's 30 frames that are listed here. Okay. Now I have the animation set up, but I don't have my little house. Well, if I want to bring my little house over, I get down to the background layer, click on that, and then I go out to frame 30 on that as well. And I click OK, click on the little spot at frame 30 and choose Insert, Timeline, Frame. If I do, it comes out and it basically brings up my house right there below my sun. Okay, and if I look at my playhead, I can tell one thing that's different. If you look at frame 30, and I wish I could zoom in on this really well, but you'll see frame 30 has got a little dot in it, and frame 1 has got a little dot in it. Okay, even though I did not say insert keyframe, it converted it to a keyframe. So a keyframe always has got a dot in it. A regular frame would actually just have a square. Okay, so it's saying that, oh, I'm going to convert this for you to a keyframe. That is why we don't have to insert a keyframe. So right now, I have I've created my animation from frame 1 to frame 30. And if I want to manipulate the path, all I have to do is using my select tool. So make sure I'm on my select tool. I can roll up to the edge of my path. When I get up to the edge, it actually gives me a little curve behind my arrow. And now I can take and manipulate it. And it will adjust the path of my animation. So I now have got my sun, which rises from my lower left up to my upper right. And I can test that without just on my timeline by just slowly moving the red box back and forth. We call this the playhead. And when a movie is actually playing, it's running with its little playhead. So I can move that back and forth to see my animation. If I truly want to see how my animation works, then I'm going to actually go up to my control and go down to where it says test movie. And we have two options, test in browser or in Animate. Well, when you try to test it, it's going to convert it to its regular Flash format. Well, the problem is many browsers don't support that right now. That is why they're moving to Animate. Okay, so I'm going to actually test in Animate. When I click on it, comes up, my sky and rise up, and you'll notice that it repeats over and over again. And the reason why is in my animation, it just basically goes to the end of the line and then returns back to the beginning. If we want to have something work that we can actually stop the sun, then in that case, we're going to actually have to put some sort of script on there. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to add an action script to stop something on the timeline.